My name's Andrew Cushman. I'm a director in the Security Engineering and Community Group, and I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be here for a couple of reasons. One, because today Microsoft's going to give you a whole track focused on security. We've never done this before. I'm also thrilled because it's actually here, and the waiting's over. I want to tell you that I think I've got the best job in the security industry. In fact, I think I've got the best job at Microsoft. And today I'm going to get to talk to you about how the work that I'm doing and my team is doing is changing the culture at Microsoft and changing the products that we deliver. I do want to set some context for you. This is a whole track, and it does kind of hang together. Mine is the keynote. Mine is probably the least technical of all the talks, but I guarantee you that you will learn something at these talks, regardless of what others might have said, and you will find that they are deeply technical. So first, who am I? As I said, I work in the Security Engineering and Community Group. I've been at Microsoft about 16 years, 17 years now. I've seen a lot of change. I started out testing localized software. I remember testing the spell checker on Word 5.0, where you had to take that 5¼ inch floppy and switch it out. I've been in security about 6 years. I actually count the time that I spent on the IIS team as part of security. NIMDA and Code Red. I think that kind of qualifies as being part of security. And actually some of the highs and lows came on the IIS side. I think that one of the lows would have to be NIMDA and Code Red, and I remember that conversation in the hallway with Mike Howard, who came up to me and said, Andrew, we got to change the permissions on the MS-ADC directory. We got to turn script execute off. And I said, Mike, you make a really compelling security argument, and I really want to go do that, but I'm particularly worried about the apt compat impact. I don't know if somebody's actually relying on that setting, and then they go to upgrade, and their upgrade breaks. So that wasn't one of the better decisions I made. I should have listened to Mike. He actually sits in the office next to me, and he reminds me on a regular basis that I should listen to him. About 2.5 years ago, after we shipped IIS 6, I said, I'm looking for a new challenge, something new to do. I was interested in security. I ended up on the security team at Microsoft. And my role today is really about outreach to the security researcher community. I'm the bridge between the community and Microsoft. And in some ways, I'm the hacker ombudsman within Microsoft, so that I represent the viewpoints of the research community, and I'm their advocate. So why am I here today? Well, I'm here to talk about the holistic approach that Microsoft is taking towards security. It's an approach it's a holistic approach that delivers changes in how we engineer products from a security perspective, changes the security in the products that we actually deliver, and also changes how we integrate and reach out to the security community. Today's talk is really in 3 parts. A little bit of history and context setting, an overview of SDL, the Security Development Lifecycle, and then also show you some results. Because I did learn that the security community actually wants to touch and feel the things. You remember your algebra teacher back in junior high? She wanted to, it wasn't enough to just show you the answer, to give you the answer, give her the answer. She needed to see the results. You needed to show your work. Well, that's what today is all about, is Microsoft showing you the work so that you don't have to go read a white paper on Microsoft.com and say, another marketing white paper that talks about how great the security is. You're going to hear today from the engineers, the designers, the architects who built either the heap or the networking stack or the Wi-Fi stack or IE, or the guy that's responsible, overall responsibility for meeting the security bar in Windows Vista. You can read the 3 things that I want you to take away from here, but really the way I have been talking about this lately that I think kind of resonates with people is, you know, it was about 4 or 5 years ago we went to the doctor, and the doctor said, dude, you are seriously ill. You're about 100 pounds overweight, you got diabetes, your heart's bad, you got a high blood pressure. If you don't do something drastic, you're going to die. That was kind of, you know, NIMDA, blaster, slammer. That was a pretty good wake-up call. And you know how a lot of people will get that message, and or they'll make that New Year's resolution that says, I'm going to go lose that 15 pounds I got over Christmas. And then January, the gyms are all full. February, it's still pretty full, but come July and August, it's like there's nobody in the frickin' gym anymore. And that's not the case for Microsoft. We've actually made the lifestyle change, the lifestyle commitment. We like going to the gym. We like those endorphins that are pumping, you know? It's not just about you have to go ship a more secure product. We actually like that, and we're getting into it. Now it's into a very positive cycle. So we get it. We know that we had a problem. We know what that problem is. We're committed to making sure we do the right things, and we're in it for the long haul. So first, a little bit of background, a little bit of history. You know, in the early years, MSRC, I've seen some T-shirts that say, you know, Patch Tuesday. I actually like those T-shirts a lot because it reminds me that we didn't always used to be as predictable and as well, we didn't deliver results quite as well. The MSRC, the early years there, we scrambled to get that first bulletin out. In fact, when we published that to Microsoft.com, that server was under somebody's desk. The Secure Windows Initiative, in the early years, I was 2 guys. I was Jason Garms and Mike Howard, and they did this because they were committed to security. They were passionate about it, and they said, we need to go do something there. That's now, it's a team that has grown and refined its skills over time. The TWC memo from Bill G back in 2002. I'm sure a bunch of people in the audience probably read that and went, yeah, another marketing white paper, another marketing white paper. I don't think very many of you sitting in the audience could have predicted the kinds of dramatic change that that paper has had on Microsoft. You know, kind of the dark days. Security community outreach. This was our first attempt, this was the first realization really that partnering with the security community was key for us in delivering more secure products. We saw some individual accomplishments. With IS6, we were applying security development lifecycle, although it wasn't actually called SDL back then, and it didn't have as formal a process as it does today. But that's what we were doing. We were doing education and training, guidance around development standards, as well as secure off by default. SQL Server SP3, similar kinds of things. SDL was applied. Windows XP SP2, again, we came back with some solid engineering that improved the security. And today, Windows Vista is the first time that we're applying SDL on the whole operating system before it ships. A little bit more context. The ecosystem's changed, and changes rapidly, more rapidly than I can, the pace of change is just incredibly rapid from my perspective. It's no longer about broad-scale attacks, it's now about very targeted, specific attacks. The maturing, the tools and the information that are available to security researchers today is marvelous compared to what it was 10 years ago if you're a security researcher. The other big change here is that there is a lot of money in the ecosystem today. There's always been money there, but there's a fantastic amount of money, and there's, I call it a very hot economy. The inflationary aspects are pretty significant. And money is the primary motivator: adware, spyware, botnets, and bot herders. And frankly, there isn't any stop to this. I don't see the change. I don't see this pace of change slackening any. The other thing I'll highlight is that attack surface continues to expand, and new attack vectors and attack scenarios. And combine that with unlimited creativity on the researcher side. You know, things we used to do are not good enough anymore. I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can certainly see them. You can read them yourselves. But again, the aspect I would highlight here is that the mainstream press, it's not just savvy security researchers that recognize that, you know, the targeted attacks are about corporate or government espionage, or that exactly how much of a motivator money is in the economy. So in that changed ecosystem, it brings new challenges, and it also exacerbates some of the old challenges. So when Microsoft thinks about how do we actually solve some of these problems, these are some of the challenges that we face. You know, researchers and ISVs are at odds. We do fortunately agree on one thing, and that's the top level thing, and that safety for computer users is important to all of us. We kind of disagree on tactics, though. You know, I had this slide written before we traded some mail with H.D. Moore last month. I was like, it was almost verbatim. Yeah, we can agree that computer safety is important, but we disagree on how the best way to get there. Security researchers don't necessarily trust software ISVs. In fact, a big part of my job is to change perceptions, both internally at Microsoft and perceptions of Microsoft in the security research community. A lot of times, in the absence of information, people will go ahead and make assumptions about why certain actions took place. Well, Microsoft must have done that because they're a greedy monopolist, or because they don't understand security, or because maybe the people who work there are just plain stupid. So putting a face on a name, that's a big part of what I do. You know, we've been talking about responsible disclosure versus full disclosure for you know, more years than Steve Lipner's been alive, I think. And the changed environment hasn't given us we haven't figured out what's the answer there yet. It's one of those problems that is exacerbated. The changed threat landscape is another huge challenge for us, and this also has implications for responsible disclosure versus full disclosure. You know, the shrinking delta between publishing details of a vulnerability and exploitation of that vulnerability puts users and Microsoft customers at more risk of full disclosure. And lastly, vulnerabilities have value in an above-ground economy. If a researcher can get $10,000 from iDefense, you know, $10,000 from iDefense, attribution in a bulletin from Microsoft. Let me see. Depends on where they are. So enough about background. Now let's move on and talk about the holistic approach. So how is Microsoft in this changed environment with heightened threats and with more attacks? What are we actually doing? How are we approaching this problem? First thing I'll highlight is that individual efforts, like on IS6 or and uncoordinated attempts, uncoordinated efforts are insufficient in this changed environment. It really requires a coordinated and a coordinated approach. This is a slide that I actually took from a marketing deck, so sorry about the pretty graphics. I put this in though because I wanted to highlight that at the corporate level, at the Microsoft corporate level, we do have a framework for how we approach the security challenges, and that is, you can read the vision there. It's a secure platform with guidance to help keep customers safe. And really there are three primary pillars there. We make investments in technology. We make investments, prescriptive guidance is another key element, and industry partnership. So that's at the Microsoft corporate level. For us, at the security engineering and community level though, the way that we're actually delivering the results in the products and in the company is that there's a centralized team that is responsible for, one team that is responsible for defining what the policy is with respect to engineering standards and with respect to response. And that team is also responsible not just for defining the policy, but also for enforcing the policy and for validating that in fact teams have met those. Security development lifecycle is one aspect. The security engineering code, that's the SDL in practice. And then penetration testing to do enforcement of the standards. Emergency response, both on a regular monthly basis as well as on a emergency incident response basis. And then community outreach, because it is key to connect with the security research community. So SecD, Security Engineering Community Department, uses the same framework. Technology investments, prescriptive guidance, and industry partnership. So I've got much more specifics on this slide about what some of those kinds of things are. In terms of technology investments, /GS for the compiler or PatchGuard, some of the heat mitigations, analysis tools and fuzzing tools. Prescriptive guidance, the security bulletin that comes out on a monthly basis, that is a form of prescriptive guidance that we deliver. The SDL, either the book that was just published through Microsoft Press or articles on MSDN. Conference presentations like these are a form of prescriptive guidance. Window Snyder, a couple of years ago, said to me, I don't understand why it is that you've got guys like Matt Conover who are giving talks on the Windows Vista or the Windows Heat. Why is it that you don't have a Microsoft engineer up there giving that talk? And it's out of that now we have a strategy and a program where engineers from the product teams are giving talks that are focused, that are not talks that they would give at Tech Ed or at the PDC, but these are really talks that are focused specifically on the security research community. Industry partnerships, conference co-sponsorship is an example of that, or collaboration with CERTs or other governmental organizations on, as well as some of the other alliances that we've formed. And honestly, BlackHat, I don't know whether you guys have heard about BlackHat or not, but that's a conference, a security conference that we put on internally at Microsoft. That again is another form of partnership with the community. So I've given you the framework. I've talked a little bit about the vision, where the vision really for the security engineering group is to embed that culture of security, both within the product teams and within the products. want to highlight start talking at this point about the security development life cycle. As you can see from the slide, it is a end-to-end process. It starts at the beginning with defining security requirements, and then there are milestones along the way for threat modeling or for penetration testing, as well as the key element here is the final security review. There are all products that must pass a final security review in order to ship. One of the key differences from how we build products today versus how we built products back in the day was that it used to be that you would write code, you'd design features, you'd write code, you'd test it, and then you'd release to manufacturing, RTM. And after RTM, you were pretty much done with the product. You moved on. The big change with SDL is that we recognize that delivering safety to customers continues long after release to manufacturing. I've got two slides on SDL. One is so that you can see that it's an end-to-end process, beginning past to RTM. And the second one is so that you can actually see that this is that it's a closed feedback loop. I also want to highlight here that the blue on the outer side that was how we did products normally. You'd go, you'd get an idea, you'd create a spec, do some development work, some testing, a couple of milestones along the way, beta testing. SDL doesn't fundamentally change those milestones or how engineering teams go about their work. It does fundamentally change the specifics of how we work and the output and the deliverables. So we took the security milestones from SDL and aligned them with existing milestones, so that you can see that security testing is included with internal testing. I will highlight one other key aspect of the SDL, which is process, education, and accountability are key elements, the fundamental elements of SDL. It defines a process that is company-wide, standards for which compiler you use or how you track bugs, how threat models should be written. There's education as well, and education is actually a key piece of this, because what we really need developers to do is to internalize the need for security. Mandates only go so far. The other key aspect of SDL is that there is accountability built right in, so that individuals have to go and accountability is built in how we actually measure and track security on an ongoing basis, whether that's from training or whether it's automated tools that actually determine which compiler version was used or whether threat models were actually written. So I just want to highlight that it really is a closed feedback loop. SDL is not a crap circle like some of these. I mean, deploy, update, support, terminate, and back to deploy, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Or from conception all the way through to maturity phase and then back to conception, not so much. But you can see that with SDL, it really is. From incident response and the security and the learnings from the Security Response Center, we actually take that, we do root cause analysis on every single one of those vulnerabilities, and we then feed that back into our development processes about what went wrong and how do we avoid this in the future. We've got automated code analysis tools or other automation. What wasn't there? How did we miss this one? So SDL applies across all divisions at Microsoft and across all businesses. As I mentioned, it defines the incident response as well as the update requirements. So if you think back to a couple of years ago, there were any number of times where patches didn't install, or you couldn't use deployment tools, MBSA wasn't always correct. The Microsoft Security Response Center defines those standards and enforces them across the board in terms of timeliness and completeness and quality. We have another team called the Secure Windows Initiative that does that as well on the engineering side, that defines them and then validates them. But SDL is not a one-size-fits-all. As I mentioned, a mandate isn't going to actually deliver more secure products. A mandate will deliver a checklist that's completed, and it might also teach people how to actually game a system. But success really depends upon internalizing the learnings. And so the final product security profile is really each team takes the SDL and then also takes their own requirements, whether these are performance requirements or customer requirements or deployment requirements, and combines them and delivers a quality a product that meets the bar for usability as well as for security. And as I mentioned before, the key aspect to SDL is that every product must pass a final security review. And there is a team of passionate engineers who actually do penetration testing. They'll review threat models. They'll actually then come in and do code audits and feature reviews. And if there's a problem, the report that goes back to the teams is, here's a problem that prevents you from shipping. You should go back and correct that problem, and then come back and reapply. And this is actually the biggest single change at Microsoft, because it was always features first. And if I'll just take IIS as an example of this. With IIS 5, everything was turned on by default, because the way employees got rewarded was by writing code and then seeing their code ship. And of course, well, you want it to ship, but you also want it to be turned on so that you can tell your mom how to go do internet printing. Today, the religion is there that it says it's off by default. So yes, you want to ship your product, but you want to ship your code, but it's off by default, and it has to be secure and also pass the final security review. I've talked a couple of times about mandates and about how really the success depends upon engineers getting it. Back in 2003, when we first started with security training, we had a single course that was called Security Basics. And we had a mandate that every engineer in every product team had to go through annual training. By the time 2003 or 2004 and 2005 came around, and people are starting to complain, it's like, well, I already took that class, and I didn't learn anything the first time. Why should I go back and take it again? That's an example of the mandate not necessarily working. We came back and we said, training is a key element of this, so that you give engineers the tools to actually do this themselves. We now have a couple dozen classes that are focused on a per discipline basis, whether this is targeted at a developer or a tester. We even have classes that are security for management, because it does actually trickle down. Secure coding practices, and this is an ongoing effort. We've got a couple dozen at this point. We'll continue to develop more. That's internally developed training. One of the other kinds of training is externally developed and deliver it to an internal audience. When I was on IIS, one of the turning points for us was NIMDA and Code Red, where every single developer, tester, and program manager on that team took it personally. The amount of pain that was caused to customers because they were running the product that they developed, that was a real shock to those individuals. And it was a visceral learning experience for us. And I know how powerful that was because it personalized that learning and it really helped individuals internalize it. Now, I don't want every product team at Microsoft to have to go through that, but I do want every developer to actually have that same sense of, that same visceral feel for exactly how bad things could get and how responsible they are. One of the ways we do that is with BlackHat. We were sitting around one day, Window Snyder and I, and she said, you know, I go to so many of these conferences, I see so many of these talks that would be really fascinating for internal audiences. And much as Jeff would love us to send 10,000 engineers to BlackHat, that's not really feasible. So what we did was we actually said, we're going to model a conference for internal audiences. We call it BlackHat because the background on the full-time badge is blue. So there's a nod to Jeff. Windows said, oh, there's so many engineers that need to know this. And I came back and I said, you know what? Actually, there's a bunch of execs that really need to get the feel for this as well. You need to get that gut punch, that reality check on exactly how things are. So we've done 3 of them so far, March, October, and then March again this year. And you can see that some of the speakers we've had. And these talks have been very impactful across the executive as well as across engineers. So Johnny Long got done talking about Google hacking, and one of the engineers from the SQL team went back to his office. And you know, the SQL team they are rightfully proud of the work that they've done. And I hear a lot of times, you know, SQL 2005, it's all off by default, baby. Well, this guy went back to his office and he did a little Google hacking based on, you know, the tutorial that Johnny had given. And here was a feature that was off by default, but that was remotely, anonymously accessible over the internet, found through Google. And that's kind of a wake-up call for this guy. It's like, whoa, that's the feature I wrote, and I was quite sure that they would go and deploy it correctly. Not quite so. Oh, and there's another one. You know, you saw that HD's name was up there a lot of times, and there were a number of other folks from the Metasploit project that have also come and presented. And there are people on my team that actually accuse me of being a Metasploit fanboy. And, you know, yes, okay. The reason Metasploit comes back over and over again is because that is, I need execs and I need engineers to really fully understand the powerful tool set that is available to anybody who wants it, free to download, and exactly what that can do. There was, you know, this last March, HD was presenting on Metasploit 3, and he talked about, yeah, we rewrote the license agreement, and then we've also created a 501(c), you know, the tax deductible. And Dave Treadwell, the VP of the .NET Developer Platform, leaned over to the guy he was sitting next to, and he said, I can just see it now. You know, the annual giving campaign at Microsoft, where they're out saying, you should donate to United Way, donate to the charity of your choice, and Microsoft will match. I can just see it coming, you know, that somebody's going to go donate to a Metasploit project, and then Microsoft's going to match that gift. You know, it's a sad world, huh? So these have been impactful in other ways as well, and for executives. So Scape came and talked about temporal return addresses. And if any of you have seen that talk or read his paper, it's pretty interesting from a research and an engineering perspective. The actual applicability of that to widespread exploitation is probably not all that great. But as he was up there talking about this, I leaned over to Jim Alchin and I said, you know, Jim, this is just like the kind of report the performance team comes and delivers. It's that quality of research, it's that quality of presentation and deliverable. And Jim was actually just astounded. It's like, wow, where did this guy even come up with the idea, first of all? And then why did he go spend all that time? So that's the power of the community that I needed to make sure individuals understood there. Again, another example is Halvar Flake came and presented on bin diff. And you know, there's a difference between telling and seeing. Just like I said to you guys earlier, you need to touch it and feel it, and we're here to show our work. Well, you know, we'd heard for a long time that you could actually go and do binary diffing, and then you could quickly identify where you could take a patch from Tuesday, and then you could quickly identify where the vulnerability was. Well, it's, you know, at a theoretical level, yeah, I get it. But to actually see Halvar demonstrate that, and then in a matter of during his presentation of 30 minutes, he actually takes the last patch and reverse engineers it, and then graphs it and says, here's exactly where the flaw was. And then, yeah, it took me another 4 hours to write the exploit for it. That has a bit more power. The one other thing that I'll highlight here is that Dan Kaminsky and Josh Lackey. Josh Lackey is a pen test lead from Microsoft, and these guys co-presented on a Windows Vista FSR. And this was a presentation for an internal audience on what was the pen test for Windows Vista, what did it look like? And I always have these, you know, I reach, the ideas I come up with are really out there. Like I dreamt 9 months ago that we could actually have a whole track on Windows Vista at BlackHat. What was I thinking? I don't know. But I said to Dan, I'd love to go give that Windows Vista FSR talk at BlackHat. And so Dan, as he's jokingly going through this, he said, you know, there was a suggestion made that we could go give this talk at BlackHat. Well, after I did some editing, here's what I came up with. And he shows a blank screen, you know. Because we just weren't going to release that kind of information. Well, don't go anywhere, because John Lambert, while he doesn't have the complete presentation, he will give you about half of Josh and Dan's talk later today on what was the final security review for Windows Vista. What was it like? So one of the other key elements of Blue Hat is the relationships that actually get built and then strengthened between the security research community and individual engineers and testers and program managers. So I remember the first one, Matt Conover came, and we were sitting in the green room, the staging room in the back, and I introduced Adrian Marinescu, who's also giving a talk later today. He's the lead developer for the heap. And I said to Matt, oh, here's Adrian, he owns the heap. And one of the other guys said, yeah, everybody owns the heap. You know? But it was that connection that actually really helped Adrian understand exactly what attackers were doing. And it's those relationships and that dialogue that really is the essence of the security outreach, security community outreach. A lot of people say, why bother? I think there's some companies down in California that say, why bother? You know, you're just pandering to these guys. Well, security community outreach is not marketing, and it's not just pandering. It's really about dialogue to see how jointly we can protect customers. How we do this is we engage the community to personalize the engagement with what would otherwise be a relatively faceless corporation. We participate technically with the community. And this is a challenge for us because it's difficult for us as we build tools internally to do fuzzing or to do other testing. It's difficult for us to actually go and release those because we have a lot of customers that still run on NT4 or Windows 2000 or IE5. And as we use those tools to make improvements in Windows Vista, I'd like nothing more than to actually give back to the community and contribute in a meaningful way. I can't do that though. So at this point, our contribution back to the community is in the form of Windows Vista or improved security products, so that we're taking away the low-hanging fruit. If you think about low-hanging fruit and how easy it was to find vulnerabilities in Windows in years past, I was like, we've taken all those watermelons that were lying there on the ground and we've removed those. So our contribution back to the community is to actually make you work harder to find the remaining vulnerabilities and advance the state of security science that way. Finally, the last piece of security community outreach is really to promote responsible disclosure. I think that the responsible disclosure, full disclosure, really hinges upon, I do full disclosure because the frickin' ISV doesn't pay attention. They don't actually do anything. So here's an opportunity for Microsoft to communicate back and say, actually, we're taking steps and here's exactly what we're doing. And a big piece of my activities are explaining the complexities of delivering commercial software to 500 million users. It's not as simple as, you know what, I'm just going to go write the code, compile it, and post this to some random website. So it's having a relationship means that you can then, on an ongoing basis, have dialogue about how best to protect customers. And for me, the goal is to coordinate the release of vulnerability details and the update. And this really is then the transition into security response. In the past, we released a patch whenever it was ready. Today, we're in a different world. We have a well-defined process, both for managing the monthly releases as well as emergency incident response. The all-up goal is to protect customers. It's a formalized process. And as I mentioned, the team within the MSRC, the security response team, is responsible for standards and enforcement across all products at Microsoft. On the monthly side, it starts with the report of the vulnerability. We triage that, create the fix, start testing. We're in continual dialogue with the security researchers. We update our development practices. As I mentioned, we go back and do root cause analysis to see what broke, what should have been there, what did we miss, how did we miss this. We then create content, both in the form of security bulletin or security advisories, as well as making sure that these are easily deployable. And then there's a coordinated release on second Tuesday of every month. We do have this other thing called SIRP, the Software Security Incident Response Plan. This was initially formulated as an outgrowth of Blaster and Slammer, where we didn't have as formal or as rigorous a process for how do you actually respond in an emergency. This also has well-defined phases. We watch, and it starts also with, okay, we're made aware that there's a problem, either through posting on a news group or some other mechanism. We watch. We say, okay, what is actually going on out there? How big is the problem? How bad is it? Pagers start going off immediately, mobilization. We figure out what other partnerships we need to go start communicating with. Development teams are immediately on board, and then again through the resolve phase. So that's enough about the overall, the theoretical. I want to make sure that I actually talk about how exactly this looks, what the results are. So I've got two case studies, one on Windows Vista. Mine is a pretty high-level overview. If you want in-depth on Windows Vista, come see John Lambert's talk at 10:15. The other case study is really on WMF from December, also sometimes known as WMF, WTF. So for Windows Vista, it starts with secure design and architecture. Our overall approach here was to find and fix problems, to use proven techniques to find and fix problems before we shipped, and apply that broadly across the whole product. It's a huge product. We weren't going to be able to pen test security into it. We knew that. We needed to automate this and use new engineering processes and standards. I've got a comparison for Windows XP and Windows Vista and how this actually looked. So in Windows XP, there was training. We asked teams to do threat models. We did component level reviews. The code was written. It was code reviewed by a buddy, and then it was checked into WinMain. You know, in Windows, and then across all code with Windows XP, there was also security bug tracking, and there were automated code analysis tools that were used. In Windows Vista, we've expanded upon all of that. We have more training, and then we have what we called quality gates to ensure that all code that migrated into the source code tree actually met certain standards. From a security perspective, some of those security basics, that security quality gate, was that you had to run prefast, the automated static code analysis tool. There were banned APIs. We said no longer can you use about 120 APIs, and that if you've got those in your code, you have to go and change those. We also had to do SAL annotations, structured annotation language. This is anytime there was a memory allocation in the code, the developer had to go in and annotate that code with a reference for exactly how big that allocation was supposed to be. The beautiful thing about this is that that actually helps the tools get smarter. We also had quality gates around privacy and reliability. So, and in addition to security bug tracking and prefix, we also did threat models across every feature in Windows Vista. Weak crypto removal, service hardening, additional mitigations, whether these are in the form from a compiler in the form of /GS, privacy review, as well as applying SDL to third-party code. There's a lot of third-party code that actually ships in Windows as binary, or where we also have source. So SDL has applied to those as well. So that applies across all features. We then also took a look at what are the especially high-risk things. What has a connection to the internet? What accepts anonymous data? And in those, we actually did in-depth design and attack surface review, in-depth threat models, penetration testing. There were numerous security consulting companies that have worked over the last 8 months on pen testing and feature reviews for Vista. That was very high level on Windows Vista. If you really want the in-depth story, stay for John's talk. So WMF. I initially gave this presentation in February, and WMF was still fresh in everyone's mind. And there was a lot of talk about, guys, you know, there were third-party fixes available very shortly thereafter. What's up with you guys? You know, researchers on the outside are faster, smarter, better than the engineers on the inside? This slide is the high-level one, and then I have a bit more detail on the next one. Things I want to highlight here are that from December 27th to January 5th, that was essentially the time frame that we're looking at here. We first noticed it on the news groups on the 27th. Teams were immediately assembled. Pagers went off, and teams were assembled, and we figured out exactly what the problem was, where the fix was. We started outreach to partners to help with AV signatures and other mitigations. We also started identifying which sites actually were distributing malicious WMF files and issued takedown notices for those. And then by the time we were done, we also did go back and say, okay, so how did we miss this one? And what improvements can we make in the future? So it was within a day that the team actually had identified exactly what the problem was, had coded the fix, and was smoke testing a buddy build of this. But in between that day and when we actually released, there was a lot of testing that went on and a lot of validation of the fix that went on. The biggest problem with this is usually application compatibility. That's why it's like I was worried about that in the IIS days. We ran, not only do we do regression testing on the WMF file itself, but we also did compatibility testing across 400 applications. But the biggest problem really when you release these, the thing that really bites you the most is the line of business applications. Those are the ones that are more complex and are least predictable. So we do have a program called the Security Update Validation Program where where a patch is given out to a select set of customers that have a environment for testing. And it was actually, so that was how we achieved broad line of business application compatibility testing there. The other aspect here was that deployment tools, we needed to make sure that WMF was actually deployable. And there are 30+ languages that Windows gets localized into. Each one of those packages needs to be released in parallel. I am just about out of time, and I'm at the end of my deck. So the things that I want to highlight for you are that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we went to the doctor. We got some pretty strong feedback from the doctor. In this case, the doctor really was the security community that gave us a pretty strong message about where we were going or where we needed improvements. I want to highlight that we have really made a lifestyle commitment here. We're still going to the gym. We still like it. And in fact, we've turned that corner. You know, there are times when you're going to the gym and you say, I don't really like my trainer. He makes me work too hard, or he's too aggressive, or you know, it's pushing me too hard. I think I'll fire that one and get a different one. You know, we don't have the luxury of firing the security community and getting a new trainer. And that's okay, because we actually are now seeking out the community so that we get the feedback as early and as positively as possible. The other thing I'll highlight is that it's not rocket science. Your company could do this too. Anybody could do this. It takes commitment. I think the key thing is commitment at the executive level and a strong centralized team that has the ownership and the accountability to go drive change. Last thing I'll highlight is we're listening. Give us feedback. There are Windows Vista DVDs out by the Microsoft booth in the lobby. Go ahead, pick one up, take it home, take it for a spin, send us some feedback. We do have, like I said, this wasn't a highly technical talk. The next ones are, in fact. Abalade is going to give you a tour of the new TCP/IP stack. He said that this was going to be a whirlwind tour through the debugger. Adrian Marinescu is going to talk about Windows Vista heap enhancements, Wi-Fi, opening the kimono. That will be, you'll hear multiple references there to, here's what we learned, here's what Dino and Shane came and talked to us about at BlackHat, here's how that's actually ended up in the product. IE7, and of course my favorite of all is John Lambert's talk about Windows Vista security engineering. So with that, I'm done. If you've got security vulnerabilities, I would remind you that secure@microsoft.com is the great place to send that information. I do have a couple of minutes for questions, if anybody's got any. With that, I thank you, though. Yes? Sorry, could you speak up? So the question was, initially you said you weren't going to release a WMF patch early, and then you came back and reversed that decision and did. The initial statement that we made was that we think testing will be done. We don't think we'll be done with our testing until the second Tuesday of January, and that's when we plan to release. Turns out that we were actually done with our testing sooner than that, and the threat environment was such that we released it. So it was ready to be released, and we released it as soon as it was ready, because the threat environment was that severe. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.